When a health guru who looks the model of health has a heart attack, social media lights up with speculation on what happened. Could it have been their diet, or is nature sometimes just random? When pondering the case of Biggest Loser trainer Bob Harper, I realized no one had collected the stories of how health influencers die to see if a pattern had emerged. So I decided to do it. In this episode, I'll tell you the stories behind the names that fascinate me, and end the episode with patterns that jump out at you once you see them as a group, instead of speculating about just one person. I've lined them up from the 30-somethings on the left all the way to the centenarians on the right. It gets pretty crowded past 80, as it should. Starting with the 30-somethings on the left that died way too young and tragically left behind young families, the curious thing is they all promoted the dietary theories of the Weston Price Foundation, which advocates a diet centered on full-fat animal foods like butter and cream. The oldest of the three was Stephen Byrnes, who wrote 4 books, like this one on heart disease. He died of a stroke around age 40. He wrote very hard-hitting essays that are still online on the myths and dangers of vegetarianism. The younger two died of liver and brain cancers. Moving on to the 50-somethings, you may wonder why Bob Harper is here, because he's not dead anymore. Dead anymore? What does that mean? He explains it in the book he wrote, In His Second Life. February 12th, 2017 is a day I don't remember at all, and a day I won't ever forget. I died that day in a gym in my New York neighborhood. Sounds dramatic, but it's very much a true story. What makes Bob so fascinating is he's living his second life on a completely different diet than he did in his first. In his first, carbs were the devil and they made you fat. But then after consulting with scientists, for his second life, he's living on super carbs. Then there's Jim Fixx, who believed that being in 4-hour marathon shape made you heart attack proof. That hypothesis took a big hit when he died of a heart attack while out running. He was an ex-overweight smoker, and my understanding from people who knew him is he wasn't focused on a healthy diet. Next is Charles Poliquin, the author of almost a dozen books about fitness and health like manly weight loss. For men who hate aerobics and carrot stick diets, finally, a weight loss program that melts the fat and spares the muscle. He was a revered strength coach and spoke to packed audiences.
Soy is very bad for you.
Yeah, and protein is something that you eat a lot of. I think there was a video that you recently posted about like you eat 2 to 3 kilograms of lean protein per day.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I really like yak.
He died at 57, tragically, apparently of a heart attack. If Charles had an opposite, it was Jay Dinshaw, the founder of the American Vegan Society, who died at 66, apparently also of a heart attack. I've read a lot of what Jay wrote, but never found details about what he ate, just his very admirable activism for kindness to animals. So I don't know, did he indulge in some vegan junk food, or did he stick to a healthier version of veganism? Leave a comment if you know. The next person up is Nathan Pritikin, who came to a plant-dominant Mediterranean diet after he got heart disease and leukemia around age 42.
My cholesterol was running at about 300 in those days. I was trying to figure out how to substitute my pint of ice cream every night. It took me 3 years until my cholesterol dropped to 100.
It appears the leukemia finally got to him at age 69. Adele Davis was the most popular nutritionist in America for much of the middle 1900s, selling 10 million books. She had that confident demeanor that consumers seemed to love.
Well, I think adults would be much healthier if they had a whole quart of milk a day.
Some of her recipes sounded healthy, like pumpkin wheat bran cookies, but most of their calories came from butter, sugar, and white flour. She died of cancer at 70. One of the most polarizing figures was Dr. Atkins, who sold more books than anyone, 15 million. And he championed a very low-carb diet. Dr. Atkins had trouble keeping his own weight down, and to the endless frustration of scientists, he couldn't show studies that proved his diet was healthy.
Now, this diet's been out there for 30 years, or close to 30 years.
And I haven't been able to fund a study. I've asked
excuse me, 10 million books in print, and you can't fund the study?
Now I can. And I will be the first doctor to dig into his own pocket to do a study.
He died at 73, and even that was controversial. Did he have a heart attack? Did he slip on the ice and bang his head? Maybe he banged his head because he had a heart attack? We'll never know, but I don't usually think of a guy dying by falling on a sidewalk as a sign of great health. On to the 80-somethings. Mary Enig was a professor of biochemistry for a while and wrote the book Eat Fat, Lose Fat. She was a skeptic about the growing belief that saturated fat led to heart disease and believed butter and coconut oil are good for you.
What they're going to find in a number of years down the road is that children who don't get whole milk, they're not going to end up with their brains functioning as well.
She co-founded the Weston Price Foundation in 1999 and died at 83 of a stroke. John Yudkin was a professor of nutrition at Cambridge who became famous for the book about sugar called Pure, White, and Deadly. He too favored a low-carb diet and believed sugar was a bigger factor in heart disease than saturated fat.
There is one food which has most of these elements in just about the proportion that the body needs, and this food is milk.
He died at 84. Okay, a lot of that was sad, but we're about to get to the very inspirational stories, starting with the hilarious Dick Gregory.
I came back in from Europe last month, CNN. Mr. Gregory, you think we'll ever catch bin Laden? I say, we. I ain't looking for him. I'm still trying to find out who my daddy is.
Hard to believe he was once 300 pounds and a 2-pack-a-day smoker until nutritionist Alvenia Fulton got him to go whole plant vegan, and they wrote a cookbook together. He was not only a famous comedian with a Hollywood star, but he promoted his vegan diet widely. His motivation for going vegan was he had feared a predisposition to heart disease, and that's what he died of at 84. The most unlikely nutritionist on this list is Ellen White, co-founder of the Seventh-day Adventists, who the Smithsonian calls one of the 100 most influential Americans of all time. In 1863, she wrote the simple vegetarian health code that can be summarized in a sentence: eat beans, veggies, fruit, whole grains, and nuts in as close to their natural state as possible. She allowed dairy, but expressed misgivings about it. Her church has grown to 20 million active members around the globe, and they're now the longest-lived population in the world. She died at 87. Then there was Gypsy Boots. What a character. He was all about yoga, being vegetarian, and loving life. He could still throw a mean football pass at 77. He died at 89. Now to John Harvey Kellogg, one of the most famous doctors in the world in his day, inventor of cornflakes, a Seventh-day Adventist. I can't even count how many books he wrote.
Celebrities including Henry Ford, Amelia Earhart, and future President Warren Harding eagerly submitted to Kellogg's vegetarian diet and antibacterial treatments. They really wanted to dethrone protein, which was the morning meal, eggs and bacon and sausage, and they thought that carbohydrates were the clean, blessed nutrient.
He died at 91. Alvenia Fulton was the feisty nutritionist who influenced Dick Gregory to go vegan and helped him write his cookbook. She had intestinal problems when she was younger and had several surgeries, which inspired her to do intermittent fasting once a week and eat healthy.
If one wants to be a vegetarian, I say this, that a vegetarian live longer, have better health, less cancer.
She lived to 92. Donald Watson was the founder of the British Vegan Society, and with his wife they coined the term vegan, which they shortened from vegetarian. He lived to 95 and apparently died of a heart attack. The great Jack LaLanne, who got me interested in nutrition when I caddied for him as a teen, was America's fitness and nutrition guru for something like 60 years. He would tell us if it came from a cow or a pig, don't eat it. He was all about the fruits and vegetables. He lived to 96. I'm going to go oldest to youngest with the centenarians, starting with the Chinese nutrition professor Zheng Ji, very famous in China, who worked as a professor until well past 100. Here he is looking pretty good for a man of 108. He's written several books, like The Wisdom to Stay Young, which is written in Chinese, so it was kind of a pain to translate with my handheld translator, but I can summarize. As far as nutrition goes, he thought a whole food diet that looks like 10% protein, 20% fat, and 70% carbohydrates was ideal. He was interviewed in a study of Chinese centenarians where they described the Chinese diet. The main course is vegetables for all 3 meals, and they don't eat much dairy. When they surveyed the 878 centenarians in the study aged 100 to 117, the most popular food group by far was vegetables. He also wrote a 3-volume set in Chinese called Health Maintenance is the Best Doctor.
You drove here today.
Driving is nothing. I worked till I was 95.
Ellsworth Wareham was a heart surgeon until he was 95 and everyone's favorite great-grandpa, who was out mowing his lawn and promoting a healthy lifestyle well past 100.
As far as my dietary program is concerned, I happen to be a vegan. I've been a vegan now for about half my life, but I was concerned about the adequacy of the nutrition. And when I found out that I could get by taking a little vitamin B12, why, of course, I then became entirely vegan.
What motivates you nowadays?
I feel that I have to make a contribution. When I was doing surgery, I made it by operating. Now I try to make it by speaking about preventive medicine.
Ellsworth lived to 104. Fred Kumaro was a professor of biosciences who spent 50 years raising awareness about trans fats. He didn't think cholesterol was a problem, and he ate an egg every day at breakfast. He believed in a balanced diet where you ate enough protein to repair cells, but not so much that it got used by the body for energy. I bought his book, and here's what a typical dinner looked like. Meat or fish prepared under the broiler, baked potato, some fresh or frozen vegetables, lettuce salad, fruit, a cup of tea.
So if you eat what nutritionists consider a well-balanced diet, and don't eat too much fried foods, you might be able to eat some, but you can't eat too much of it. Then you'll never have to worry about heart disease. That's what I believe.
Dr. Kumaro lived to 102. I saved the most famous and polarizing figure for last, Ancel Keys, the man who popularized the Mediterranean diet. The internet has decided he was an evil scientist who got the US to panic about fat in the 80s. They blame him for the obesity crisis, who caused millions of deaths, all because of his massive, decades-long 7-country study. You know, most conspiracies are hard to disprove, so maybe NASA really did fake the moon landing, but you would think this particular conspiracy would be easy to disprove just by looking at the cookbooks that he and his wife Margaret, a biochemist, wrote to promote the Mediterranean diet. With cheese and fish on the cover, does the diet they promoted famous for olive oil look zero fat to you? They simply promoted a diet low in saturated fat, the Mediterranean diet, the most popular diet in the world. Adding fuel to the conspiracy fires is the journalist Nina Teicholz, who has no scientific background.
Keys did a lot of, there's hardly a better word for it than kind of saying fudging the data.
I guess it's possible for Ancel to have convinced teams of scientists across 7 countries to fudge their data for decades. If NASA could fake the moon landing, I guess anything's possible. And why would the scientists do it? To keep us from buying the butter so they could hoard it all? I guess there's hardly a better word for it than Nina's a conspiracy theorist.
And he published it in obscure German-only journals. I had to go back to obscure places. He really didn't want this data to get out.
Or you can just go to Amazon and buy the whole study. Or go to Harvard University Press and download a digital copy for free. Or go to 7countrystudy.com and get links to 10 books about the study and 580 peer-reviewed papers from all over the world. My favorite book about it was from a real scientist, a professor of lipid metabolism from Rutgers, who believes Ancel was a genius. Ancel died at 100, and his wife Margaret, who assisted him all those years, died at 97. You may have noticed someone peeking out from the top of my chart. That's centenarian Jerry Stamler, still working on heart disease, funded by the NIH with a team of researchers at 100. It gives me comfort that Ancel's colleagues are still publishing real science when science denial has gone mainstream in America. He eats the Mediterranean diet. So what jumps out at you from this page? The first thing for me is the 2 main camps. The low-carb, high-fat gang to the left, many of whom looked amazing in their day, and the high-plant group to the right, some of whom also looked amazing. I didn't include Adele Davis or Jim Fixx in either group. And yeah, I could have included more names like Norman Walker, the raw food vegan juicer pioneer who sold so many books and died at 99. And Linus Pauling, the mega-vitamin no-sugar man who died at 93. And Ren Berry, the vegan who wrote about famous vegetarians and died at 68 of a heart attack while out jogging. And any number of Weston Price and low-carb tragedies. But none of them really changed the pattern. The second thing is the high percentage of overlap in the diets to the right. In an interview when Ancel was 93, he described the Mediterranean diet as it was when his study began, as mainly vegetarian. My perception is the Chinese diet is 90% Mediterranean-like, but with very little dairy. Even the vegans, which are somehow perceived as extreme, have 80% overlap with the Mediterranean diet that Ancel described. By contrast, the overlap between the low-carb diets on the left and the diets on the right is much less, maybe 20 to 30%. The third thing is the education level and scientific stature is highest on the way right side. The fourth thing is the very popular gurus in their day spanned the spectrum from left to right. I get the impression that what they had in common was they had some charisma.
You know what I want you to do? Get up on your feet, give me a big smile.
They spoke with great confidence.
I'm not kidding you. If you really jump on this bandwagon, like your body's gonna start burning fat like crazy.
Okay.
And they let you eat foods with mass appeal. For example, Ancel and Margaret had cheese and wine right on the cover of their cookbook. Okay, Chris, but who's still alive, still publishing and speaking, and has the stature of that far-right Colin? I'll let Ellsworth answer that question.
This, as it says, is the most comprehensive study of nutrition ever conducted. How do you like that?
Lucky for all of us, one of the true greats is still a spring chicken at 87 and just published a new book, The Future of Nutrition, an insider's view of the science. I can summarize what he believes very simply. It isn't just about the saturated fat, as Ancel believed in his day, but also about the toxic effects of too much animal protein and the perils of letting protective whole plants like veggies get pushed off the plate.
Almost every time we looked, what we found was the same answer, just glaring at us. And that was the closer we get to a plant-based diet, the healthier we're going to be. End of story.
And please protect us from getting this episode downvoted to oblivion when all the carnivores show up. I hope you enjoyed it. I've put all kinds of fascinating links in the description below. You can really help us by liking and subscribing. Thanks so much for watching.